So, for years and years, Ariel Scarcella was known for pretty much two things. That she was a transphobe, right? And that she would make clickbaity, softcore porn videos. You know what I mean? Like, the thumbnail will be like two hot chicks in a state of undress, and it'll be like 10 top tricks to make squirt, and it gets like 5 million views or whatever. That's gotta be, I'm gonna make that my strategy in the future. But it's just gonna be my face in the thumbnail. Anyway, a little while ago, Ariel Scarcella left the left. Not that she was ever really on the left. Her only real progressive position has been being pro-LGB. Actually, I don't even know if she's pro-bisexual. I genuinely don't know. I don't know. But her I left the left video was just, man. It was made in 2020, I think, or late 2019. And it had Big Red in it. It had like Trigglypuff in it. It had the lady who yelled when Trump got elected. It was like it was like a mishmash of every conservative, grifty, skeptic community trope straight out of the die cis scum era. I mean, it was just so outdated, but she made it, and since then she went on Crowder's show to talk about how she's bravely pushing the truth, and her numbers have just flatlined, by the way. Nobody watches the shit she puts out anymore. Like her current video. Look at this. Look at this. More gays support Trump in 2020. Here's why. No, black trans women didn't start the Stonewall riots. Can't imagine why she would want to fight back against that perception. He, him, lesbians, Muslim women are oppressed, the dark truth. Then the only video recently got a decent number of views is the one that I went over, where we dead name Elliot Page. I take hormones at home test for pregnancy and health. Lesbian fingering, best sex toy review. It's nothing inherently wrong with that content. I dated a trans man, my sexual truth. Anyway, here we go. 2 weeks ago, 1/3 views. Lesbian sex, how to ride a lesbian. I think if you look at her videos by most popular, please stop slapping women's vaginas. Trans woman shows lesbian her vagina. Gay guy shows lesbian his penis. Straight girls explain penetration versus oral. It's been 8 months since I got any. Bi curious girls kiss for the first time. Is my vagina ugly? Right. So we're not really coming for the political takes, you know? Anyway, then we have something about Biden. And then, non-binary is confusing at best and sexist at worst. And I'm ready for it, okay? I just want to hear. I want to hear the takes. Give it to me, Ariel Scarcella.
Hey babes and babe lovers. So today's topic is non-binary, and as a member of the LGBT community, this comes up in conversations an awful lot, and I don't
know if she's a part of the LGBT community anymore. I think she's pretty broadly hated by the LGBT. I don't know why she'd throw the T in there, you know?
I've never fully expressed what I think of non-binary, if it's even a thing, if it isn't a thing. First of all, I don't think that anyone in the non-binary community even can fully explain what non-binary is. It seems...
Why would you ever make a claim like that? I'm pretty sure literally every single non-binary YouTuber has made some video or multiple videos where they explain exactly what they are and what they believe. I can't think of a single... Yeah, I don't know. It's honestly pretty easy to explain once you accept the basic premises of like gender, like gender constructivist theory.
Seems like it's this made-up term that anybody can use for whatever reason they want.
I'm not male, I'm not female, I'm somewhere floating around in there.
Wait, cool. So you're a girl? You're a trans woman, but you're also non-binary? How is that possible? I don't get it.
I think that non-binary is actually a new woke way of saying androgynous, just like wielding a sword of wokeness over the new...
No. Non-binary identities have existed in our culture and in others for way, 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 way longer than whatever conception of gender Ariel Scarcella works off of has. It means well, I mean, a lot of non-binary people are androgynous. I guess that often does come with the territory. But you can be an androgynous woman, you can be an androgynous guy, or you can be a non-binary person, you know? There's a bit of an overlap? I don't know why she's pretending like people haven't explained this.
New term for validation purposes, for pronouns, for control.
Don't identify with having a gender because I found it really restrictive.
It gives me the freedom to express myself. If I wake up one day and I want to spike my hair and do punk rock makeup, I can do it.
So clothes, makeup, the way they speak, the way they act, whatever. And that's one of the reasons I haven't made a video on this topic. No one has really been able to come up with a concise definition for the term non-binary.
Wait, the concise definition for the term non-binary is a person who identifies outside of the binary. That's the definition. What you're watching is descriptions of why people want to identify as non-binary, or the ways in which they present non-binary. You're not looking at, like, imagine if you asked somebody, like, what do you enjoy about being a woman? And they give you like a big speech, and at the end of it, you're like, okay, it seems like you don't even really know what a woman is. Like, that wasn't even the question. That wasn't even the thing being discussed. You're taking a look at people describing their fashion preferences and impugning them for not describing their identity. They're two separate questions.
You define the labels don't define you. So you can bring your own definition to whatever label.
Forehead or something.
Yeah.
And secondly, most of the people I know or that I have seen that identify as non-binary are A, very, very young, and B, tend to seem like they are doing it for a very, very political reason, almost like a fuck you to the patriarchy, or fuck you for telling me how I should think and act.
No.
Does Ariel Scarcella know what the political origins of, like, the lesbian movements in America were like? Wait, hold on. Ariel Scarcella, big fan of lesbianism here, right? Do you have any idea what lesbian organization has been like in American history? Lesbian organization has been explicitly political in America, and the reason why it has been is because that identity, being a lesbian woman, wasn't accepted by society. So to be one is itself a defiance of social normality and social trends. The only reason you're able to present openly as lesbian at all without, well, I guess without getting even more hate, is because your political predecessors acted in ways that were politically motivated. And as for non-binary people tending to be young, and there are a lot of, hey, I guarantee you that if you ask girls whether or not they're lesbians, you're going to find a lot more of them in the college age demographic than in the boomer age demographic. I wonder why that might be. Maybe we've gotten more socially progressive with time, so more people are comfortable with it now. Maybe people tend to go through an experimental phase when they're young, and that's normal and natural, and you probably just let them work that out, and people tend to settle down in identities later on. Maybe there's a lot of shit that goes on there.
Non-binary people don't owe you shit. They can use whatever pronouns they see fit. If they dress femme or mask, don't worry about it, cause it's not your fucking bitch.
Which is funny because you're actually telling people and telling the world that you are taking yourself out of a box by putting yourself in another box.
Non-binary is not a box. It literally means outside. This is like saying atheism is a religion. It's like, you said that you were in a box back when you worked at Goldman Sachs, but now you are unemployed. You've just put yourself in another box. Like, no, the removal from a set of categories is not the same as being in like a category in the same way. I guess you can say being a non-binary is a category in a sense, but that's not really a box in the same way, you know? Pretty much everything has some kind of term or definition to describe it, but it's a pretty broad term, non-binary.
One of the questions I have for the non-binary community is there a difference between somebody that is actually non-binary and transsexual people? So transsexual meaning people that are born one sex and transitioning, even though you can't technically transition to another sex, but...
Yeah. All you'd have to do is like ask one. Yeah. Yeah. Or I should say they're overlapping categories. There are non-binary people who do engage in some kind of medical transition, and there are people who engage in medical transition who are binary, and there are binary people who don't engage in medical transition. But there's an overlap, but these aren't the same thing. I mean, you can talk to like a non-binary person. ContraPoints has done videos on this. ContraPoints has said there are different types of trans people, and there's nothing wrong with recognizing that there are different types of trans people, as long as you're not saying that one of them is worse than another one, or that one of them is valid or one of them isn't, or whatever. But there are non-binary people who engage in some kind of gender-related medical treatment. Lumi Rue on Twitch, they're non-binary, and they got a breast reduction surgery, I think, right? But they're non-binary. But there are non-binary people who don't do that. It's just, yeah.
Visually, secondary sex characteristics, trying to appear as the sex they
Vaush, is that TMI? I'm pretty sure they were pretty forward outcoming with that information. The reason why I said for a while there is because I was trying to remember if that was information they made public, but I remember them making that very public. So yeah.
feel more comfortable as. If non-binary simply means just the way that somebody feels or acts, isn't everybody inherently non-binary?
Holy Jesus Christ. No, the answer is not yes. It's a matter of identification. No, non-binary isn't about, it's just about identifying a certain way. This is close to gender abolitionism, but she wouldn't set this standard for like women, you know? The reason she's saying this is because she's essentially arguing that a gender constructivist approach means that everyone would fit into a certain category. So if a person like me says that, say for example, like being a man is identity and performative, then she would say, well, then isn't everybody a man? She's not saying, she's not engaging in a gender constructivist take. She's trying to make fun of it. Chat, I love you guys, but in your attempt to try to interpret her statement positively, you're misrepresenting the argument. So calm down, okay?
Like everybody has more masculine and feminine traits somewhere in their head or their body or whatever. Even if it's not all the time, even if it's just sometimes. It's not normal to be perfectly binary, right? Everybody is kind of on the spectrum. If we're
non-binary person does not mean a person assigned female at birth who likes drinking, I don't know, beer instead of wine, okay? That's not the definition of non-binary.
Talking about feeling, thinking, and presenting. Because obviously we already know that sex is binary, sex meaning gametes.
We don't know that, actually. Biologists do not refer to human sex as binary. It's bimodal, where our sexual attributes and characteristics are on a two normal distributions that peak in different places, but there are overlaps between them. Here, hold on. This is an extremely critical distinction, okay? Binary and bimodal are not the same thing, okay? It's very important to know that, okay? This is a binary distribution. You've got men and you've got women, or female and male, okay, because we're talking about sex. Okay, that's a binary distribution, okay? A bimodal distribution, is like this, where while it is true, let's get some gender colors in here, huh? While it is true, that's basically the same color. That's also basically the same color. Good enough. Where the reason why bimodal is essential is because you will have people who occupy an overlapping space where they adopt characteristics on both ends. Now, in reality, because of the way sex and sexual characteristics work, the actual distribution is probably a little bit closer to this. This is going to be a very rough approximation. Where you have a very narrow vertical distribution at 2 peaks, but you also have it spaced out horizontally. So it approaches like a logarithmic distribution to infinity at both peaks, if that makes sense. Anyway, that's very important, okay? Just write notes down, okay?
Male, female, sperm, egg, simple, basic stuff. No.
Non-binary has nothing to do with sex, so this doesn't really matter.
Intersex is not a third sex. And we know that gender dysphoria is also a real thing. It has been scientifically credited, right? So what does non-binary mean?
What was that cut?
It has been scientifically credited, right? So what does non-binary is also a real thing. It has been scientifically credited, right? So what
Jesus.
does non
That's spooky. It's her face. It's like fucking screamer. Jesus.
Non-binary mean if it is a physical thing to some of these people?
No, who has claimed that non-binary is an extra sex? Have any of you ever heard a non-binary person make that claim? I will say that because a lot of the engagement about like non-binary people online is dominated by young voices, that's true. There are a lot of people who say dumb shit out there, but like I think that if you take just 5 minutes to look this stuff up, it's not that hard to understand.
Like, does that mean having partial gender dysphoria, like only having dysphoria on part of your body? And if that was the case, I could get behind that because it is scientifically backed and it would make sense to me. That if somebody came to me and told me, listen, I'm non-binary, I feel if I was fully male, meaning like flat chest, testosterone-driven body, producing sperm, having a penis, I wouldn't feel comfortable, and I don't feel comfortable fully as a female either. As far as the law goes, I think that would be very tricky. I think it's becoming increasingly difficult to figure out how to treat non-binary people in the world because a lot.
How? Wait, why? How? What? This complete diversion. We're talking about like sex characteristics. It's nothing to do. The whole point of being non-binary is that it's not dependent on sexual characteristics. That's one of the reasons why people identify as non-binary, because people associate sexual characteristics with gender expectations. That if you're born with a dick, people are like, oh, fucking XY chromosomes, ka-chunk, here's a bunch of social expectations, or with whatever the opposite of a penis is, I guess, whatever fucked up thing, then they're like, ka-chunk, here you go, you're a woman, social expectation, have fun. But I imagine that a lot of people are driven towards the uncock, sorry. A lot of people are driven, I imagine, towards a sympathy with a non-binary identity because they chafe at the idea that their physiological characteristics should determine a component of their identity or of their social roles, you know? Now, that's not all of it, of course, but I think that's definitely a part of it.
A lot of things are sex segregated or gender segregated or socially sex segregated. As I just said, I think if it is physically and biologically and gender dysphoria based, I can get behind the idea of non-binary, but if it is just something as simple as not fitting gender stereotypes, I actually think that is an incredibly sexist idea. What do you guys think though? Do you think non-binary is a real thing? Why or why not? If it is a real thing,
I have to say, I wish that I could live life with the unbelievable arrogance of people who have a video on a topic about an identity that millions of people adhere to around the world in some variant or another, and then at the end she has the gall to look at her camera and go like, so is it even a real thing? Like, does it even exist? I don't know. Answer in the comments. Like, okay. The question should be, like, if you want to be sincere or forthcoming, your question should be, should we respect this identity? Or like, how valid is it, or something like that, which as far as I'm concerned, there's a right and a wrong answer, but that's the question you're asking, not does it exist?
or if it is something that you know could be a real thing, what do you think the definition of it should be? Yes, I am filming this on a different day because apparently I had a lot more to say than originally anticipated.
Oh, shit.
One of the most important questions I have currently regarding non-binary is, why does being non-binary mean the erasure of female characteristics?
What? Okay, right off the bat, because the title was non-binary is confusing at best and sexist at worst. So where are we getting at? Is this going to be the same as the being a trans man is misogynistic because you could have just been like a butch woman? Is that the term? Is that the direction we're going in? I suspect it is.
Let me explain. Why is it that almost every single female born person that calls themselves non-binary either goes on HRT, testosterone, or at least gets a double mastectomy, top surgery?
What? I don't think they do. I mean, there's nothing wrong if they do, but I'd be willing to bet that, like, the vast majority of non-binary people, maybe not the vast majority, I'd say a majority of non-binary people, from what I've seen and from the impression that I've been given, probably don't have gender dysphoria that would lead to them seeking out some kind of medical treatment. That's just not the impression that I've been given. Some are, and that's fine, but that's not the impression that I've been given.
When people who are born male identify as non-binary, usually only just change their gender expression, meaning they wear different clothes, they change their hair, they wear makeup. How often do you see someone that's male that identifies...
Wait, that's also not true. Wait, hold on. Quite a few assigned male at birth people identify as non-binary on the way towards recognizing that they're a trans woman. That literally happened with ContraPoints. ContraPoints identified as non-binary for a while before recognizing that she was a woman and going ahead with that. Yeah, Jim Sterling is non-binary and on HRT. Yeah. So I think that she is overrepresenting the number of AFAB non-binaries who get on medical treatment for dysphoria and underrepresenting the number of AMAB NBs who do the same. That is the impression that I'm getting here. Probably to prove a political point. I'm also willing to bet she did literally zero research into this, and she just had, like, a vague, thin impression, you know? That she just wanted to... Yeah. Convey a political point through.
...is non-binary getting boobs, getting a boob job, or going on HRT. Why does...
Wait, hold on. I can smell... Is this the lesbian flag right here? Right here? I can smell terf pixives when I see them. What are they? Picrew? Is that what they're called? Terf picrews? It's not? What is it? It's upside down? That's the lipstick lesbian red flag? Vaush, you should know this? No, I don't bother memorizing all of the fucking queer flags. Wait, what is this? I don't care. Stop. Do non-binary males get surgery at the same rate non-binary females get mastectomies? Not in my experience. The male body and male names to an extent are considered a neutral default. What? I don't understand the correlation between these 2 points. Even if this first point was true, and I don't know, the second point, I don't see how it naturally follows.
Why does one sex feel like they have to make physical changes, but the other doesn't? My friend Chad said this really well, I think. Men are taught to decorate their bodies if they wish to express themselves outside of gender norms. Women must bind, hide, disguise, or physically remove their femaleness in order to accomplish the same. I think this really all...
Wait, hold on. First of all, you missed the best part of that tweet, which is this guy saying, instead of loving every inch, which feels like kind of a weird thing to say in the context of this conversation. Second of all, okay, this is one of those, there's like a quarter of a truth buried underneath a really bad argument here, okay? It is true that expressing gender nonconformity for AMAB and AFAB people, not being gender nonconforming, but expressing it, can vary. That is true. And the reason for that, and I think you all will agree with this if you think about it for a second, the normal default state of human, social expectation-wise, is a man. When a person draws a stick figure, and then they want to draw another stick figure, that's a woman, they give that one hair. The first stick figure, neutral, default, is presumed male. That is the case. And you can see iterations of this all over the place. Or they give it a skirt or something. Yeah. Same with bathroom signs. In bathroom signs, the men's bathroom is just a stick figure standing up straight. The woman's bathroom sign wears a dress. It's weird, right? I mean, if you actually think about it, there's nothing more inherent about any or other. If you want to make a really essentialist argument, then you should probably say, if anything, the female one should be the default, you know, originator of human life, whatever. So that's the underlying truth to this. And it is true that in many cases, gender nonconforming men are such and present as such by wearing or adopting mannerisms that are more overtly feminine, whereas many gender nonconforming women express that by reducing the extent to which they express feminine characteristics, both in behavior and in appearance. From what I've seen and experienced, that does seem to be the case. But that's not because of sexism on their part, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. The reason for that, no, there's nothing wrong with either of those, Hassie, at all. I think it's lovely that people should be able to do whatever. I think the reason for that is because, unfortunately, male bodies are considered the default. We have other iterations of this as well, that are pretty easy to point out. For example, when people think of an androgynous character, they tend to think of a flat-chested one. No? Now, AMAB people tend to be kind of flat-chested by default. Not always, but they tend to be. Whereas obviously AFAB people, it varies tremendously. But you would think that an androgynous presentation would be somewhere in the middle, or it would be something more neutral, rather than a slant all the way towards perceived masculine presentation. The easiest demographic of people to present androgynous, from what I've seen, from what I've experienced, tend to be flat-chested women or flat-chested AFAB people, whichever. The reason why this all gets so complicated, and I'm trying to wrap this up, I'm sorry. The reason why this gets complicated is because there's a lot of really complicated overlapping social expectations that, with regard to what types of performance and behavior we expect to be default and which ones we don't. Like for example, what's the natural state of human hair? Short hair or long hair? Like, unironically. I guess if you really want to get to it, the default state is long hair. I mean, we had to invent cutting our hair, you know? We had to work on that. I'm sure cavemen cut their hair somehow, but, you know. But for some reason, short hair is considered the androgynous default, and long hair isn't. But hair is completely arbitrary. Males and females, or AMAB and AFAB people, whatever, are both equally capable of having hair of any length. There's literally nothing, like anyone can do this. Literally anybody can do this. Well, depending on your type of hair, it's not going to look exactly like mine, but anybody can have long hair or short hair. But for some reason, short hair is universally considered to be an androgynous characteristic, and long hair isn't. Long hair is considered a feminine characteristic. Short hair can be masculine or androgynous, depending on how it's done. I mean, a crew cut's considered masculine, but just like short hair, like in general, that can be androgynous. Does that make sense? Do we all understand what the underlying grain of truth is here? Does that make sense? Okay, I hope you all understand. So that's the grain of truth. Now let's watch her run this into insanity.
To accomplish the same. I think this really all comes down to, how does one express being neither gender or neither sex? Is the presence
it's not about neither sex. I've met non-binary people with like a fat ass and huge milkers, okay? I've met non-binary people who are just fucking stacked, okay? And I've met 6'2" bearded non-binary people who I can only imagine just have enormous dicks in college. I can only fathom, you know? Yeah, big dick energy. Yeah, exactly, Aina. Yeah. It's not a sex thing. It's nothing. Non-binary doesn't inherently have anything to do with sex.
breasts, much more obvious as a gender marker than the absence of them? Why are males that identify as non-binary only adding to themselves while females are removing parts of themselves? To me,
again, this is incredibly cherry-picked, incredibly nitpicked.
that suggests that the male body type is the default gender. Why is one sex more...
Not necessarily the default gender, just characteristics of masculine presentation are considered the default presentation for a human being. I mean, for fuck's sake, we call humanity man, you know? There are plenty of ways in which this seeps into our culture.
Focused on gender expression, clothes, hair, makeup, while the other is more focused on physical changes, like I said before. Testosterone, HRT, top surgery, basically not being perceived as female at all. I'm gonna end the video on a very controversial note because I think my friend Chad, who identifies as non-binary, by the way, makes a really good point. He said in older generations...
Wait! Who identifies as non-binary, by the way, he says... Okay.
Trans men adopted a variety of masculine looks that fit their personality and often worked to reach an ideal masculine physique, which I agree. Look at people like Buck Angel. But the current generation isn't doing that. Is anti-female now equal to teenage boy? He asked.
So this is what I meant by insanity. This is utterly fucking meaningless. I don't know what they mean by in older generations, trans men, etc., etc. That is not true. There have been trans men in society for a very long time, and not all of them turn. First of all, trans men aren't non-binary. They're trans men. Second of all, not all trans men turn into fucking hulking muscle titans, like Buck Angel has. Credit where credit's due. Sick bod, bro. Third of all, anti-female equals teenage boy? What the fuck are we talking about? Like, unironically, what the fuck are we talking about? Is this like a anti-racism equals I don't know what the logic behind this is. What does this have to do with non-binary people? And if we were talking about non-binary people, why do non-binary people have to look like Buck Angel? Wouldn't that be a deviation from non-binary a little bit? If you're like, I'm non-binary now, time to look like a hulking muscular dude. I mean, you can if you want. If you want to be non-binary and go for it, fucking go for it. But I don't know if that's like the default non-binary presentation. I don't even know if there's enough of an argument here for me to deconstruct.
Why? I think he makes a really good point, and it's definitely up for a debate. And it's definitely...
I think they're calling modern NBs like twinks or something, and I think that's bad, I guess. I don't even think that's true. The reason why a lot of people get that impression is because all the sea of non-binary representation are 15-year-olds on TikTok. I think that's why. That when they think of non-binary, they think of somebody who shaved their head, who has a bunch of lipstick or sparkle glitter gender, and they're doing a hip dance on TikTok. They're doing the floss, okay? I think a lot of people get that impression. First of all, non-binary presentation and identities have existed for a very long time in cultures all around the world. And second of all, there are older non-binary people. Just get to college, okay? There are plenty of people going by they, them, who... I'm not trying to invalidate their identity here, but with regards to presentation, they would have to tell you for you to know they're non-binary, you know? It's an identity thing. It's not always a big performance thing. Sometimes it is, and if it is, that's fine, but it's not always that thing. That makes sense? Did we do it? All right, pretty dumb as always. Ariel Scarcella doesn't come off as particularly malicious here, but given the comments that she's made about trans people, not just non-binary people, but binary trans people in the past, this is the equivalent of like jacking off, just asking questions off, you know? If Ariel Scarcella wanted to, she could spend 30 seconds familiarizing herself with these positions. But instead, she makes this video where she presumes that it's about sex and then asks why nobody else has a definition for what non-binary means, and just, yeah, you know. It's a very good rhetorical tactic, by the way. You can do that with anything. You can do that with anything. You can, like, oh, hey, I'll give you an example. Candace Owens does this all the time. Conservatives do this all the time. Why aren't black leaders denouncing black on black violence? How many times have you heard that from conservatives, huh? Hey, That's a really common one. I hear that shit from them all the time. They do. Constantly. If you actually look into it, black leaders, like social rights or civil rights leaders alive today, that currently engage pretty frequently in summits and in talks and in speeches and initiatives and donations and charity drives and everything for the explicit purpose of reducing black on black violence. It's a very well addressed, acknowledged, and substantiated issue. But conservatives will pretend nobody is doing this, nobody at all, because it serves a rhetorical function, because it makes it seem like the left is hypocritical for only caring about a cop killing a black person now and again, when 80 trillion black people die every day to gang murder shootings, etc., etc. Why does it seem like every TERF is just a man-hater that has it out for any AMAB person, no matter their identity? Because honestly, and I'm not the only person to say this, and hopefully this isn't too incendiary. I don't know if this refers specifically to Ariel Scarcella or whoever else, but a lot of TERFs have had negative sexual experiences, like sexual assault or rape, with men, and the way they internalized that trauma led to them being fearful or mistrustful of characteristics they associate with men, which they believe are biologically ordained. I mean, J.K. Rowling literally says this in the big manifesto that she went over. She literally said that, like, a lot of her suspicion and concern on this comes from experiences with assault that she had had. It's deeply unfortunate, but trauma doesn't let you make other people traumatized. Unfortunately, that's not. I consulted God, and he said that that's not how ethics works. So, well, that's that doesn't free you from criticism. Yeah, I consulted, you know, the Quran, the read the word of Allah, you know. Yeah. And a lot of TERFs are kind of man-hatey, you know. That, by the way, that's one of the main reasons, not the only, but one of the main reasons that I dislike, like, man-hate online, because a lot of it really does feel like it's shorthand for what would later become transphobia. Which is pretty unfortunate, you know. I also don't think it's okay to be shit to men because they're men on its own face, but even if you're only concerned for marginalized people, like, I think that's also worthwhile, you know, a worthwhile way of looking at it.